Today we're saying happy birthday to a man who spent very little time in Maine, but had a pretty outsized influence on the future of the state. And that can happen when you're the richest man in the world.
Certainly is. Andrew Carnegie was born on this date in 1835 in the country of Scotland. His parents moved him to America when he was 12. Eventually, he would grow preposterously wealthy in the steel industry and then turn around and give nearly all of it away. In the last 18 years of his life, he gave away 90% of his wealth, much of it going to starting libraries all around the country, including more than a dozen of them right here in Maine.
I started out reading the story hour at the library and then worked my way up the ladder to become a student page.
Senator Susan Collins spent some of her formative years in a Carnegie library. People in the town of Caribou had already started the effort to get a library going. But around 1910, Carnegie donated $10,000 to get that project off the ground. Senator Collins told us during her first term that she is who she is today because Caribou is a close-knit town that really cares about its kids. Last year, as we've been reporting, Senator Collins pushed for expansion of broadband service, especially for rural parts of the state.
That's because while places like Fort Fairfield have Carnegie libraries with good internet, they're not always available to locals.
Our students are having to stay in cars at night to get their homework done if they don't have the access at their homes or sitting on the library steps.
That last mile of service has not been built out yet in our state. It is as important as the roads that connect us. It connects us in a different way.
The bill Collins sponsored was aimed at incentivizing companies to invest in rural broadband. It got rolled into the larger infrastructure bill that was passed last summer. Now, in 1903, Carnegie donated $25,000 for a new public library in Auburn. That would be worth nearly $850,000 in today's money, but the city of Auburn doubled from the year 1900 to the year 2000, so just after the turn of the century, library leaders got together a proposal to expand on the original building.
That addition cost more than $7 million, but it was designed to keep the style of the original while also saving some money where they could. For instance, the original building was built with mahogany. Some of the features in the renovation are actually birch that's been stained to match the darker wood. They also added better internet access and special rooms for young people there. Some of the Carnegie libraries come to life not just because of the sudden influx of cash, but because of the people who worked there as well.
Yeah, in 1897, Carnegie donated $2,500, about $90,000 today, to finish the library, but it was a librarian named Laura Richards who gave the building life.
She lived and breathed this library into being in town, and she spent time here. She brought her mother, Julie Ward Howe, to speak up in Library Hall. She came to dances and balls, events upstairs, and she raised money. They had fundraisers, and she would participate in those.
Julia Ward Howe wrote the lyrics to the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Laura Richards wasn't just a librarian, she was also a poet and a writer. While living in Gardner, she wrote 95 books. The first was in 1880. Richards was too humble to recognize the impact her books had on the American public. However, she was invited by President Teddy Roosevelt for lunch at the White House. In another achievement, the list goes on here, one of her songs was used on Sesame Street.
Once there was an elephant who tried to use the telephant. No, I mean an elephone who tried to use the telephone.
Oh my. One more thing about Carnegie and Maine. We said at the top of this segment that he spent very little time here, but we did find one society column in the New York Times. In August of 1916, Andrew Carnegie and his wife visited Bar Harbor on their yacht, of course, before heading for Nova Scotia. They spent their time in Maine with another wealthy family, the Astors.